You want to support Roland Martin Unfiltered? Be sure to join our Bring the Funk fan club. Every dollar that you give to us supports our daily digital show. There's only one daily digital show out here that keeps it black and keep it real as Roland Martin Unfiltered. By going to RolandMartinUnfiltered.com, you can make this possible.
These young people are moving into their future at a time when the student loan crisis has risen to the forefront of the national conversation. Democratic presidential candidates have been placing affordable college front and center in their campaigns. Americans currently owe almost $1.6 trillion in student loan debt, more than auto loans or credit card debt. An average African-American graduate has $7,400 more in debt than their white peers, and the debt continues for years after they graduate. Joining me to talk about the issue is Dr. Lawrence Potter. He is the Chief Academic Officer and Provost at the University of the District of Columbia. Welcome, Dr. Potter.
Thank you for having me, Dr. Malveaux.
So you saw your commencement, and we had a wonderful time there with Dr. Maxine and Dr. Reverend Jackson, 42 times Dr. Reverend Jesse Lewis Jackson. They both gave a charge to young people, but this debt issue is an issue that isn't going to go away. What's your perspective?
Well, I think we have to fully understand that, number one, African Americans are not born with intergenerational wealth. And so the very act of a Robert Smith paying off the debt for African Americans in the 21st century is not simply paying it forward, he is simply honoring the cause. If you look at most of the institutions in this country, it's quite pricey. And when you compare public versus private education, right here in the university, in the city of the District of Columbia, there's only one public institution. And when you think about the founding of this particular district and the opportunities to access, it's very clear to me in the 21st century that if we're going to level the playing field, if equity is going to be part of the manifesto, then people are going to have to step up. And that's just what Robert Smith did. He stepped up to the plate to honor the cause.
But even if a dozen Robert Smiths stepped up, that $1.6 trillion in student loan debt, they can't chip away at. What should happen from a public policy perspective to get rid of this debt?
So I think that there are a couple of things. We need to really think about how we view higher education in terms of a 21st century model, right? It was not designed for us. And so when you consider the shifting demographics, when we talk about parity, higher ed for me means that we're going to have to think about multiple kinds of ways in which students have access to achieve their career ideas or their career goals. And the reality is that that doesn't always equate to a baccalaureate degree. There are credentials. We can do stackable credentials. Individuals in today's world are able to make a whole lot of meaning out of life with passion in a job. And so it's not just about being a doctor or an attorney, but it's really about rethinking higher ed and putting the offerings out there and creating opportunities for young people to be able to amass what it is that they think that they want to do.
One of the things about UDC that's exciting is that it is a public institution, so students are not taking out the same kind of debt that they might take out at a Howard or a more, at our private institutions. You also have several paths to success. Talk a little bit about that.
Sure. There are three doors of entry at the University of the District of Columbia. We have workforce development, we have our community college, which is a branch campus of the main campus, and then of course we have the traditional aged undergraduate programs that lead through a master's and a doctoral degrees. The reality is that our workforce development or lifelong learning programs are free to residents of the district. So we are subsidizing that. And those programs are continuing education units. It allows individuals to kind of off-ramp, on-ramp, to continue to better themselves in their career paths. At our two-year college, we do a whole lot of things with respect to pathways into four-year degrees. So an associate's in nursing, or there may be a general education degree in STEM that leads to biology or chemistry and mathematics. And then at the four-year campus, the cost is phenomenal. Students can attend the University of the District of Columbia depending on their credit hours and where they come from, anywhere from $5,000 to $10,000 a year. So they're not as strapped with the debt. But I think the significant piece is the clientele that we serve. Most of our students are first generation. They're not the traditional 18 to 22-year-olds. We have a lot of returning learners in the district coming back because they've had to stop out for whatever reason. And so when you think about the average age of the student at the University of the District of Columbia, it's 28. And so we're having to meet needs in a more defined, more creative way.
Now, Dr. Potter, the Higher Education Act they're looking at reauthorization of that act. What would you like to see in the reauthorization?
Honestly, when I think about first generation college students, I want to see an increase in Pell. And some are Pell, quite frankly, because our students have to go to school year-round. Many of them are working 2 part-time jobs or a full-time job, not just to support themselves, but their families. And the reality is that everything that we can do as a country to increase Pell, to reduce the cost, those are the kinds of things that will be significant.
The Orange Man has in deference to Malik, I won't call him the orange orangutan. The orangutan lobby has asked me not to do that. But the Orange Man is trying to go up in the Pell money and use it and divert some of it. I don't want to get you on a political bandwagon, but what do you say about that?
I really think that sometimes people are making decisions without information. And the reality for me is that before decisions are made, we have 3 branches of government. And, the executive branch can put forward what it is that they want, but the legislative branch needs to act according to how people voted for them. And so that would be kind of my balance, if you will. The idea that acting without information leads to uninformed decisions.
Dr. Potter, you're so diplomatic. I love it. I'm going to bring my panel into the conversation. Cleo Monago, you posted something today on Facebook about increased graduation rates for young black men in Chicago. And this really fits into some of what Dr. Potter is talking about. Tell us a bit about the story about how young black men are graduating more frequently in Chicago than they were, let's say, a decade ago.
Well, I think it's important to highlight that type of information because, as I said in my post, you won't hear it on CNN or ABC or the other channels that this is occurring. Or we hear about Chicago that people are getting shot. But there's some successful programs on the high school and college level in Chicago that are leading to disproportionate amounts of black men and women graduating to college.
It's like a
level.
10% gap over a 10-year period from 63 to like 75, yeah.
And what's significant or relevant to that is how these schools have implemented cultural affirmation and getting the young people to feel good about living in the body that they live in so they can be focused enough to concentrate on the cognitive information that's coming instead of being distracted by self-doubt. And I was wondering while you were speaking, here in D.C., do you have programs that address organic intelligence and cultural affirmation and those kinds of elements to help keep our people connected to academics?
So I would say, having been on the job for 90 days, there are clear...
90 days?
A whole 90 days, yeah.
But to answer your question, I think that we find cultural affirmation not only in the classroom, but outside of the classroom,
Absolutely.
Right? Students spend only about 30% of their time in a college education in the classroom. It's about what are we doing outside of the classroom? What are those wraparound services? And fortunately, the University of the District of Columbia we're responding in a proactive way, right? We are creating the spaces for commuter students to be able to sit in the library and study so that they don't have to detach themselves from the campus to go home. We are also looking at, how do you build in Women's History Month activities and Black History Month activities and Native American History Month activities and tie that to the curriculum so that there's the co-curricular aspect of rounding out what our students are having. And so I think in many regards, because our students are not the 18 to 22-year-olds, we are very proactive and intentional about what it is that we're trying to deliver in the wraparound services.
Kelly, Dr. Potter just talked about Women's History Month, and there's some real challenges that women are having in terms of matriculating in higher education, especially single moms, women who have other kinds of challenges. one of the challenges I found when I was president at Bennett is that how do you provide childcare for students? What's your perspective? You've been so passionate in talking about women's issues, so tell me your perspective on how, with all this financial aid trauma, women can matriculate and, frankly, thrive.
I think that the approach that Dr. Potter is taking from a holistic perspective is absolutely brilliant, because you have to take into consideration exactly what your students need. And if a large body of your student population is women, what do women need? You need childcare. You need access to feminine products in the restroom. You need adequate feminine products in the restroom. You need education on sexual ed. I know that with UDC, the age is a lot higher in terms of the average age, so I'm sure they know. But like just traditional schooling, some of these kids are coming in from, you know, who knows where. They didn't
Young
have
people, they don't like to be called kids.
You're a kid.
They do not like to be called kids.
You're a baby. Young adults, I apologize. But at the same time, nevertheless, you know, even though they did just come through K through 12, a lot of them don't know about their own bodies yet, and this is actually the prime time that they're about to go explore them. So having the resources to feel safe enough to ask those questions to somebody who knows what they're talking about, that's definitely something that women could benefit from. I would also encourage, you know, self-care techniques. I know a lot of young women who were in undergrad, at least when I was there, dealt with depression, dealt with, you know, some really traumatic things, including rape and molestation and things like that. Having a safe space to talk about those things on top of, you know, more curricula about women, that's definitely something that could be taken into consideration.
Well, one of the things UDC does, and I'm a member of the UDC family through my television program, Malveaux, exclamation point, because whenever you see me, there is an exclamation point.
True.
But in any case, one of the things that UDC does is there's a Center for Diversity and Inclusion that really does, a young sister, Trinice McNally, really has done a lot of really great work in providing those kind of services. Now, Malik, you and Dr. Potter are homeboys.
Yes.
So,
Mississippi. Even went to college together in Alabama. Well, I have to say, just right off the bat, that we are so proud of you.
Well, thank you.
We are so proud of you. And the fact
so Malik will behave for you. He ain't been behaving for me, but he'll behave for you.
I mean, your credentials speak for themselves, but the fact that you brought that talent to the University of the District of Columbia, which happens to be the school that I actually finally received my degree from, because I'm one of those who went back later on in life. And so the steps that UDC has taken have been tremendous, and I so value you being there. So I just want to say, from Mississippi, thank you, brother. But to your point, you raised a very good point about you know, exploring other avenues as far as just our education. In the District of Columbia here, you know, they just have an infrastructure academy, and what that does, it trains them for a lot of the vocational. So whether you're talking about plumbing, carpentry, electric work, you know, these are actual. I have a friend of mine, Perry, who is participating in the district's apprenticeship program. You know, Perry's from Southeast DC, Condon Terrace. Perry's from Southeast DC, but this brother is making a life for himself and his family by applying, and he's actively engaged in it. He's, you know, he does construction, he does plumbing, but this brother is proud of the work that he does. And so if we can just get more of those type of opportunities out there, you know, you can make a middle class living outside of just graduating from college. And so these type of vocational trades,
That's
I think,
how
are
it
just
used to be.
well
once upon a
Dr.
time.
Malveaux, I want to mention something real quickly. You probably already know. I just met you, so I don't know how much you know, but clearly you know a whole lot.
Well, I wanted the two of you to be together because I thought there was a lot of synergy.
But you mentioned, absolutely, you mentioned that there's a small element of time that people spend in school compared to their whole lives. And what I want to just underscore is that the system does not affirm culture affirmation.
Right.
It does not make black culture affirmation an accessible thing like Starbucks or, you know, whatever else is going on in the culture. Sometimes people discover that opportunity through a great teacher that they finally met through these opportunities. And I think it's important to give students the equipment to be able to have critical analysis outside of school as a way of life. particularly as black people in a white supremacist biased society, so they can thrive and navigate through here and still have their skin. Literally and racially.
And Dr. Potter, we're going to
Did that make any sense?
Yeah.
It made enormous sense. And I want to roll it back to have you comment both on what Cleo said and to bring us back to the student loan issue. Right. Because when you talked about Perry, I don't know how much loan debt Perry had to take, if he had to take any. So, Dr. Potter, both cultural affirmation and financial ability. How do you, as the Chief Academic Officer at the University of the District of Columbia, put these things together? And what and what would you tell our viewers about what they must do to ensure that things can get better?
So on the issue of cultural affirmation, I have to issue the disclaimer that they're not just going to get it in higher ed. It's got to start at home.
Well,
It's got to start at home. Not even in the K through 12. It's got to start at home. And if I didn't learn anything as a kid, I was taught you need to read, and if we couldn't afford certain kinds of privileged programs, we went to the free programs at the library because you could go there and get a book. And my grandmother would always say, if you want to hide something from a put it in a book because we don't read.
But that's just not the truth. I hate that adage because I hate that adage because you know, 1836 North Carolina law, to teach a slave to read is to incite dissatisfaction to the detriment of the general population.
Absolutely.
A white person who taught a black person to read could be fined up to $200 in 1836, which was a goo-gob's worth of money. A black person could be flogged or jailed for teaching another black person. Yes, people were blinded because they learned how to read. So that, I don't know where we got that from. We probably got it clear from white people.
Probably.
Yeah, anyway, continue, Dr. Potter. I'm sorry.
I think it's also important to understand that whatever enrichment programs that the churches are providing, that the community-based organizations are providing, public-private partnerships are absolutely essential. And you really have to pull organizations in that look like you, who think like you, to create those partnerships. Because if you are trying to fleet to the suburbs and find that, it's going to be very kind of disconnected. And so the reality for me is that it's at every developmental level of the child's experience. It's the community, it's the home, it's the school, it's the social organizations that really instill cultural affirmation. Because I don't think that you're going to get it in one setting or in a particular kind of way. The other piece that we're talking about is this debt, right? And the reality is that students are making wise choices. Families are making wise choices. If you look at the demographic shifts in the U.S. today, black and brown kids are not going to the 4-year institutions first. They're going to the 2-year institutions because it's about a question of affordability. And it's also about a question of access, right? And this notion of privilege and walking away from whatever opportunities that are laying on the table, people are not willing to sell their souls up the river anymore because of a price tag. And so I would say that we really have to get back to the real issues that are being debated by some of the Democratic candidates, not all of them, but what really makes sense for college tuition or higher education in this country. And I'm not suggesting that there's a one-size-fits-all, but we really need to begin to have the serious conversations if those at the bottom are to climb.
Dr. Potter, thought-provoking. Thank you very much.
All right, folks, back to our Roland Martin Unfiltered video in just one moment. All right, fam, I invited you to come out swinging and join me for a day of golf at the University for Parents Golf Tournament on Saturday, June 22nd in Southwest Atlanta's Wolf Creek Golf Course. It's a golf tournament with a purpose, a fundraiser for the University for Parents, a program designed to empower parent learners through education, inspiration, and support. It's all a part of Susan Taylor's National Cares Mentoring Movement. Now, when you empower the parents, you empower the children as well. Location of the tournament is 3000 Union Road, and the shotgun start time is 9 a.m. To register, go to www.u4parents.org, letter U for parents.org. For more information, be sure to call 770-316-3487, 770-316-3487. I certainly hope to see you there. Now back to your Roland Martin Unfiltered video.